Hi, I'm Z-Wing, and today I'm going to be going over my 13th place run at the Star Wars Unlimited Minneapolis Regional Qualifier that took place about like a week and a half ago. I played Han2 Data Vault at the event, and I'm going to be doing a little bit of like a tournament report as well as a duck tech. So let's get into it. To start us off, I guess I realized I haven't posted on this channel in a little bit. I have still been playing the game. I made some videos a while back, like right before the Boba ban and then right before the Django ban. So weren't exactly relevant to post, but I still have been engaging with the competitive scene a decent amount. This year, I ended up top eighting two PQs at the beginning of the year, top eighting the San Diego PQ with Quinlan Tarkentown, top four of San Francisco with Han1 Green. And then I also went to Denver before this as well, playing the sectional. Didn't do as well with Django, but I mean that meta was, a little bit coin flippy, if we want to think about it that way. And then more recently, had this really good run at the Minneapolis Regionals that I'm going to be talking about today. So yeah, still really enjoying the game and hoping to get back into the swing of it with content. So here's the deck that I played at Minneapolis. It's pretty stock for Han2 Data Vault. I mean, the deck really just started becoming popular maybe just like a couple weeks before Minneapolis. I know like Code Amaran posted a video that I saw where I think he won a PQ, and I think definitely his list was a pretty big basis for mine. I was playing a good amount of Han2, both like the blue version and ECL, especially like during set two. But I think while Django was one of the better decks in the meta, that this was a lot harder of a shell to play. But now that Tarkentown was on decline, this is something that I wanted to pick up and ended up doing pretty well with it. All in all, I'm gonna get into like some of the more specifics a little bit later, but this is a pretty it's a zoo-ish, mid-rangey deck that has like a pretty good late game. There's a lot of play to it, and there's lot of really fun lines. You're playing units. You're playing units like for cheaper and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot to really like with this deck, and I'll kind of break it down more later. All right, so getting into the tournament, I ended up going 10-3, going 7-2 day one, and then 3-1 day two. My only losses were twice to Cad Tarkentown, which I believe is probably the deck's worst matchup, and then once to the Mirror as well, which I mean, the Mirrors are usually a coin flip, and there's not too much you can do about it. I started day one, round one, I lost to K2D Maddie in the Mirror. The I think he took the first game. I ended up taking the second game, but we were going really late. We were going to time, and then we ended up going to time, but I conceded. I think he was going to win in another couple turns, so I just gave him the win there. Ended up the tournament was a little bit weird because they didn't announce. There was a couple like different things between what they announced on the website and what they announced in the announcements before the tournament started. So people weren't even sure during the first couple rounds was this going to be a 9-round day two, because technically we didn't hit like the number that is set on the website in order to make it 9 rounds. People weren't sure if it was going to be like a 7-2 cut or a top 64 cut. Turns out it was a top 64 cut, so actually a draw would have been okay. I was thinking that it was a 7-2, so a draw would have been bad for both of us generally, but that was not the case. But ended up being fine. Like I'm okay with taking the loss there. I think the draw bracket, you never know what can happen in that. He might just play against a bunch of Palpatines or something, which would have not been great. And then, but yeah, ended up winning round two, but then losing to Cad in round three, which was pretty rough. I think I was really trying to dodge this matchup, kind of like what I was talking about, where I think the deck became pretty popular because the Tarkentown decks were becoming less popular. This was a matchup. I think this is probably one of the worst matchups and something that I was trying to avoid, but almost won it, ended up barely losing that matchup. And at this point, I was like thinking, okay, well, this is going to be a pretty hard run from here. But I guess ended up going on like an 8-win win streak from round 4 to round 11 until my third loss in round 12. Ended up, I'm not going to kind of break down like all of the games and things like that, but ended up, just kind of playing really well and beating a bunch of, getting a bunch of pretty decent matchups, honestly. Like, I think this deck is pretty favored into a lot of the like hero green type decks. That's what I played a lot of. One of the things was, getting into day 2, my last round, round 9. That was against a Han1 green, which can be really rough. I know that matchup was pretty memorable. In game 1, I think I got literally like hit for 30 over 3 turns with a Millennium Falcon or something like that. I had no answer to it, but I was able to kind of clutch it out in games 2 and games 3. And then, I ended up making day 2. I think in order to make top 8, I would have had to go 4-0, which is really difficult. Almost did it, but not meant to be. Really happy with the run, though. At the start of the round of day 2, ended up playing against a Vader Yellow. Barely squeezed that one out. And then ended up losing to Ray Tan in round 12 on Cad Tarkin, another really close match. He ended up getting second overall of the whole tournament. So super good run from him. And then closed out the day of a win as well to finish in 13th, which I'm really happy with. I think I ended up over the tournament like winning the games that I was supposed to win, and like the matchups, were both two times to my worst matchup and once to the mirror, right? So I can't be that upset about that. 13th, I believe. As far as I know, with like the last information I heard, I believe I should be able to get a invite for Galactics or Worlds. Last I heard, there were like four people that would have a pass down in the top 8 for the invite, and then one person above me in the standings that had their invite already as well. So in theory, it passes me. But just overall, super happy with the tournament. And then I want to talk about the deck I played now. All right. So the deck I played, this is Han Solo Worth the Risk. So the thing about this deck is kind of like I was talking about before, it definitely fell a little bit out of favor while Tarkin Town was like king. While Django was like running around and being able to just like tap down all your units and Tarkin Town your early plays, this was not what you wanted to be playing. But now that Kira is one of the best decks, and that Kira plays pretty well into the other Tarkin Town decks, we saw at Minneapolis the meta share for like Quinlan and for like Cad, which are like the 2 premier Tarkin Town decks, was definitely lower. And this is something that I took into account while I was preparing for the tournament as well. I was actually thinking about playing the ECL variant of this deck, so a little bit more towards like 1-drops. I think Sip from the Swoop Racers really popularized that version, and I was on that version for a while, but then one of my teammates was working on like a list, and I kind of copied some things from him, and then ended up putting it together, playing a few games, and kind of just going with it. Hoping that playing similar style of stuff before, I would be able to pick it up, and ended up working out pretty well. The thing that's really nice about this deck is that it's just really flexible, and you're able to just play a lot of really strong overrate units at like every point in the curve. So you have a lot of options and a lot of play lines that you can really come up with, and sequencing is really important. One of the big things of this deck is that it almost plays in some ways like a limited deck, where you're just playing creatures and you're trying to just get a board advantage, whether that's trading or whether that's forcing your opponent to make bad trades or whatever it is. There's a lot of skills from limited that really carry over, and limited is something I absolutely love in this game, so I think that's why I really gravitated towards this. I also want to briefly mention Data Vault as well. I think myself coming from like a Magic the Gathering background, I think I remember when I saw this card spoiled, I was immediately like, wow, this card is so unplayable. Like the consistency part really hurt me, and I was just like, yeah, this 3 life doesn't matter. Like nobody should play this. But as I started to realize and I started to think about this game a little bit differently, I started to look at this game actually in kind of like the flesh and blood lens, where um, a lot of times like the cards in your deck, like they're kind of just like the resources, and you really just like a lot of times will need just like a couple, like one more turn in order to be able to stabilize a game, and that's what Data Vault really provides. Um, because you're drawing so many cards over the course of a game of Star Wars Unlimited, usually, if you build your deck for that, you're going to be able to, in some ways, lessen the consistency hit that Data Vault requires. And especially the way that this deck is built, there's a lot of redundancy in it. There's a lot of cards that really just do the same thing. So that also helps with the consistency hit from Data Vault as well. Overall, I felt like the 3 life really matters, and where the 3 life really matters is that against the 25 HP bases like Tarkin Town and ECL, you're actually just 8 life up on them, which allows you to be able to race them actually really well, because 8 life is super significant. So, and that's something that we saw earlier with like people, I remember in like set 1, set 2, like going to more like 30 HP bases, like 33, like 8 versus 5, that's like pretty big. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about Data Vault, because I think at this point most people are pretty on board with it, but there might be still some skeptics on it. I do believe that not every deck should be running it, and I think you do have to build around it. Like you have to make sure you're putting in a lot of like redundancy in terms of the cards that you put in your deck. If your deck needs some really specific cards like early in the game, like for example, like Han1 really, a lot of times wants to find like the resupply really early. And if your deck is going to function worse because you have a consistency hit of not being able to find that card, then I would actually consider, not playing Data Vault and that kind of thing. So you have to really build around it and think about how it's going to affect like your overall game plan. So before I start talking about all the Star Wars cards, one thing I was thinking about as I was making this and as I was like practicing the deck is, if you played other card games, this deck is just Big Zoo. This deck plays really similarly to like the Zoo archetype from like Magic, and then obviously it was popular in Hearthstone as well. Where you're just playing really efficient early game creatures, and sometimes like these creatures are able to just let you have an aggro plan, but sometimes like you use your creatures to be able to like trade into an even more aggressive deck and get really favorable trades there, and then being able to finish off the game with really strong like kind of big chunky later game creatures, stuff like like a Baneslayer or something like that. Like Poe is almost like our Baneslayer angel in this deck. Where there's these cards that just are able to just completely take over the game and forces our opponent to really interact, and makes it really hard for them to interact, and gives us a lot of options about how we end up wanting to play out these kind of matches. So I think thinking about like Zoo has been an archetype that I've loved like over multiple different card games, and I think is a big contributor to why I really enjoyed playing this deck and why I really gravitated towards it. So getting into some specific cards, I don't want to necessarily go over like every single card from the deck and break down everything, but what I want to do is I thought about some like categories of cards that I wanted to talk about, and I think it's really important to understanding like how the deck functions and what you're trying to think about as you are playing the deck. So the first set of cards that I brought here are cards that have a lot of flexibility. I think the really cool thing about this deck is that Han2's hero ability lets you just have a lot of flexibility in how you curve out during the game, where you're able to make the decision, do I want to play a guy for cheaper? Do I want to play for the full cost to have more HP? And you have to really think about like these almost like breakpoints and like how each unit stats are going to line up against like the opposing deck's units and also removal. And this is where the cards that have a lot of flexibility come in, because they really let you have a lot of options. A card like Cassian, for example, you have a lot of options about how to play this, right? You can play him as a 2-resource 3/3. There's a Battlefield Rain, great card, right? You can play him as a 3-resource 3/5. 3/5 is a pretty good stat line, especially against like Tarkentown decks, for example, where they're not able to just like ping Tarkentown to finish him off. And then later in the game, you can like play him to pressure damage, and you maybe even like present lethal with like the smuggle, right? Having a guy just sitting in your resource row, being able to come into play ready is also super strong. So you have a lot of options of how you play a card like Cassian, right? Really similarly, Poe Dameron, right? You can play him for 4 mana, and you can play him. You can play him for 4. You can have like a 3/3 and a 2/2. You can play him, and one of the really strong things, and I think Poe is one of the best cards in Han2 for the reason that you can play him for 3. He comes into play as a 3/1 because he has 2 damage on it. You make the X-Wing, and then you can actually just pilot onto the X-Wing. And because he is now an upgrade, the damage falls off, right? So now you just have a 4/5 X-Wing in space for 3 resources, which is really overrated. So Poe is one of these cards where it's like you can go wide of him, and in some matchups you actually really do, where you want to just kind of like split him up. You have play Poe, you have a ground unit and a space unit. You can make a big space unit. You can play him as a pilot and play him on another space unit that you already have. So you have a lot of flexibility in terms of how you play Poe. Really similar to Blue Leader. Blue Leader is like a card where this is probably the card out of the deck that has like the most flexibility in how you play it, where you're able to just play Blue Leader for 2 resources, 3 resources, 4, or even 5, and you have a lot of options of how you do it, right? You can play it as a 2 resource 3/1 ambush in space, like a 3 resource 3/3 ambush, 4 resource like 5/3 ambush on the ground. Which is really strong into something like, the Sabine deploy or something like that, right? Where a 5/3 ambush just like takes out Sabine, survives on 1 HP, and then they have to deal with, your 1 HP Blue Leader now. Or like 5 mana 5/5 ambush, or, you ambush as a 3/3 in space and then move it to the ground arena, something like that. Like Blue Leader has a ton of flexibility. And it's also you can get it back off of Home 1, which is another card that's just like really crazy in this deck. I think Han2 is one of the best Home 1 decks because you're able to play it for cheaper. Being able to play the Home 1 for 7 is really strong. Like, even if you, like, just getting back your 3, resource unit for free is super strong, helps you stabilize, or helps you build a board again. But being able to play the Home 1 for cheaper in this deck lets you actually play out bigger units or more costly units from your discard pile with Home 1 a lot earlier than other decks could. Like, for example, you could play the Home 1 for 7 and then pay an extra resource, like, pay 8 total to bring back like a 4 cost, right? You could bring back like a Poe. Or if you have like 9, you could bring back like the 5 resource Poe, and that's huge, right? You have you pay 9, you have a 7/5 ship in space and a 6/6 that attacks with like a 6/8 on the ground, which is huge. You're able to bring back a lot of like your utility units. You can bring back like your like resistance A-wing type of thing to be able to pick off other creatures. So you just have a lot of flexibility in how you use Home 1, right? You can bring back Blue Leader, and that's what makes the deck really strong, where you're able to just have a lot of options when you play cards and how you play cards and how you want to sequence. So talking a little bit about the game plans of this deck, I kind of broke it into like 3 parts, where I think this deck can operate on a few different axes. Which is what makes it really strong and really hard to play against, where to start with, you have this aggro plan. And these are all cards that like you can, have seen, maybe not, Adelphi is not as popular in Sabine anymore, but the other ones are just like Sabine staples, right? Where This just the curve out of like Battlefield Marine into Cassian into like, you know, a 4-drop into Poe is just like really strong. Or Poe can be our 4-drop in this deck, right? Which is really good if they aren't able to remove it. You're able to just like with certain draws have this plan where you're just beating them down and you have 8 more life than them and you're able to win races. Being able to play like Poe as like a 6/4 for 4 that they must kill immediately, otherwise Poe could potentially attack for like 8 or maybe like 10 with an Adelphi. That's really strong. And a card like Adelphi or Adelphi, you're able to really just be able to pressure your opponent and have this plan where, you know, let's say that you're curving out and you play out your Poe on 4, and then you follow up with like an Adelphi on 5 and hit them for like 10, right? That's crazy. Like one action, just like, you know, like dome them for 10 is a lot. And the other thing with like Adelphi is like you're able to just be really action efficient and almost have like an event that's like stapled to like your creatures. That's like the big thing with a lot of our creatures where because we're not, if you think about how the deck is constructed, we're not playing a ton of events. So we really need our creatures to be able to like interact and impact the board. And be able to almost act as like pseudo events. And that's what a card like Adelphi does, where you're like able to keep adding to the board, but also be able to like interact or do like things that like events would kind of do. And we want to play as many units as possible because that's how we take advantage of Han2's leader ability. So yeah, this is a plan that, like the aggro plan, is something that the opponent has to react to, which then can make it really difficult for them to play into the kind of what this deck often does in the mid game, which is this like space mid game pivot. So what ends up happening in a lot of the games is that you end up going like pretty wide on like the ground, and the opponent has to answer all these like Battlefield Marines and all these Cassians and all these like Chams that you're playing out. And they have to really focus on being stabilizing in that space. And then while you're doing that, what you're going to end up playing, and you know, on the 5, the 6, and the 7 and resource turn sometimes is like all these big chunky space units. You know, the card like, you know, I was talking about before, like Adelphi is really hard to deal with, especially even if you play it like as like a 4/6. Against like blue decks, 4/6 is almost like a magic number because it dodges Fell the Dragon and it dodges Takedown. So playing out these like Adelphi and then Hammerhead, like when they took so much time and effort and their resource decisions were a lot based on like trying to counter this like go wide aggro plan that you had on the ground, then they're just not ready to be able to contest your space, and you're able to just kind of clock them with these big units over a couple turns and take them out. Yeah, and like Home 1 is able to just get like a massive, you know, board swing. Like you're able to just kind of, you know, make a couple units in space, or maybe make a space in a ground unit or something like that. And you just basically are making, playing out a lot of creatures that often interact, you know, something like Hammerhead, right? Like Hammerhead is able to, you know, finish off like a small unit or something like that, or finish off a big unit that took a trade into one of your units, for example. And you're able to just kind of keep putting, you know, pressing down on like the gas pedal. You really, with this deck, want to make sure that you're always trying to take tempo. And that's the biggest thing, where this deck, you're just playing units, and because of that, it can be really hard to come back from like certain board states where if you start falling really far behind, just like playing, you know, guys is not gonna make you come back in these kind of games. So what you really need to do is you just need to keep up the pressure, and you need to make your opponent like kind of respond to the threats that you're putting out. And oftentimes the threats that you're putting out, because you can play them for like cheaper at like weird parts of the curve, where their, you know, their creatures or their units or their removal might not line up, you're able to really just put your opponents in a tough spot where they're just not able to really answer what you're doing and not being able to really play around what you're doing. So yeah, that's the really strong part of this deck, where you're able to kind of just like make this pivot, and you don't always have to make this pivot too, right? If they have like a big face presence, or you feel like they're going to be able to answer it, you could just keep playing all your ground creatures, right? You could just keep playing more Poes and Wreckers and all that kind of thing, right? But because it has this option, this is actually how I won a lot of games during at Minneapolis, where a lot of people are just not prepared for this option. And it's just something to think about, and something to know that the deck can do. Finally, I want to get into the late game of the deck. And I think one of the things that's really unique about this deck is that you're able to almost like look like an aggro deck early, but then also just have a really strong late game. Cards like Poe are like still really good. Like they're really good on, when you're on the 4 resource turn, they're really good on the 5 resource turn, and they're honestly still really good on like the 7 and 8 resource turn if you're playing Poe plus another unit or something like that. He's just gonna be a must answer, and sometimes your opponents run out of removal or run out of really easy ways to kill him. And then you just have cards like Wrecker and Mace Windu that come in and just like will be able to just take over the ground arena by themselves. And then along with Home 1, which I talked about, crazy card, you're able to use it in so many different ways. You're able to really get a huge board presence earlier than other decks because of Han's ability and being able to make playing the Home 1 cheaper. You're able to get out like bigger units, like bring back a Poe or something like that. So that's a really good late game piece. Also lets you stabilize as well with the Restore. And then you have Crate Dragon, which you can play for 8 resources as like a 10-8, which is really crazy and something that a lot of times your opponent is going to have to spend a lot of like their removal dealing with like your kind of mid-game stuff, right? Because you're putting on so much pressure with the deck, they might just like run out of removal by the time you play the Crate Dragon. And if the Crate Dragon ends up staying around for like, a turn or two, yeah, you're winning that game, right? So I would say that Crate is one of those cards that you don't want to necessarily just like tunnel on. I think it can be really easy, and I've seen some people like think about like, oh, if you have Crate Dragon, this is like a Crate Dragon deck, right? Sure, some games you are gonna win a Crate Dragon, but you don't always want to just like make that be like, yeah, this deck is just going to be a late game deck that's always just going to like play towards the late game, play towards the Home 1 and Crate Dragon, and that's what I'm going to do every single game. Because you actually have a lot of options, and kind of like that's why I wanted to talk about these like 3 plans and these 3 like kind of stages of the game. You have a lot of ways that you can play out the game, and it's not always just like go to late game, play Crate Dragon, win, because that doesn't actually always get you there against every matchup. So you really have to be thoughtful about how you want to play each matchup, and what cards are really important and what cards are gonna make it hardest for my opponent to like interact with and be able to do their game plan as well. All right, the final thing I wanted to talk about is just a little bit around the events that we're playing in the deck. So we're only playing 3 copies of these 3 events. We're playing 3 Confiscate, mainly just because there are some upgrades in this game that are really difficult to deal with. Stuff like, you can easily lose games to if they pilot on like a Millennium Falcon and you don't have any upgrade removal and they just like start clocking you with a unit that you can't deal with. Being able to just have a Confiscate is really nice. The reason why we're playing Confiscate over another card, like let's say like Fang Fighter or something like that, mainly just like Confiscate actually just fits better in the curve and in the deck than Fang Fighter. Fang Fighter, we can't discount with Han ability unless we want it to just like die, which then is just worse than Confiscate. And Confiscate being 1 resource is really nice because Han's ability lets us discount our units for 1 resource. So it really doesn't mess up our curve often at all to be able to like weave a Confiscate in there, which is a lot different than how other decks might have to weave a Confiscate into their curve, where they might have to play a cheaper, play a cheaper unit. Like let's say it's on, you really want to Confiscate on the 4 resource turn. You might have to like, if you really want to Confiscate there, you might have to keep the Confiscate in like a 3 drop rather than keeping your 4 drop, which would be stronger, because you know, let's say you want to just have it up, you know, for when Sabine Darksabers or something like that. Being able to still have like all your options, not really have to deviate from your plan if they don't end up Darksabering, is really strong. The other card that's really nice is Timely Intervention, and this is something that's really good in the long games, especially where you're able to like play it from the smaller row, or maybe you play it for one, and you're able to. We have a lot of cards that are just really good when they have ambush. Obviously, you know, we don't have ECL, but Poe and Wrecker are still really good when you're able to ambush them, and I've even ambushed like a Crate Dragon and stuff like that in certain matchups. So Timely is something that it is often pretty hard to play this card into the matchups where you really need like an ambush early. Like oftentimes it's just going to be too many resources because when you play Timely, you won't be able to discount the unit off of Han2's ability. So it ends up just costing like a lot of resources in order to do. But because of that, this is something that just is really strong into the late game, or into the mid late game, I guess, when you're able to have all these really big beefy units that you know, have pretty relevant like on attack abilities that you're able to timely out. The other card that looks a little bit weird is the off aspect Fell the Dragon. I got this idea from Code Dameron's original list, and originally I really didn't like it, but I think as I played the deck more, I think it's kind of like a necessary evil, where you'll realize as you're playing this deck, there are going to be units from like popular units, especially ones that cost like 6 or 7 resources, stuff like, you know, 7 mana Luke Skywalker, you know, 7 mana Han Solo, Enfys Nest, that kind of thing, that if they are going to stick around for multiple turns, they are going to completely clean up your board and stabilize your opponent. So there are going to be situations where you really just need like an answer to like the Luke, or you just need an answer to the Han. And you gotta just hope that, you know, they don't have another one, or maybe like if they play it, they're only able to like, you know, kill off one unit. You fell, they're a big guy, and then hopefully you have enough still left around that you're able to kind of finish them off with that. So I think there are a couple cards that I wanted to kind of test in this slot. You know, maybe trying out like a Strike True or something like that. Obviously there's like pros and cons of that, right? Where if you play any cards that, you know, rely on you having board state, you know, that's going to be a little bit less reliable there. But I think having just some kind of plan of how you're going to out these like big stabilizing creatures is pretty important, because the color combination of like red green hero can't really deal with them that well, and they will, you know, let your opponent like stabilize in those kind of games. So that's the main stuff I wanted to talk about the deck. I think a lot of the rest of it is like pretty straightforward. You're just kind of like playing out good units, like, you know, on curve, or maybe earlier than curve, and you're able to just really figure out like what cards you want to play to make it the most difficult for your opponent to deal with it. So let's get into some of the matchups for this deck. So some of the stuff that was favored is, you know, things like Kira and things like Rey. So these kind of like blue, I guess people call it like soft control, but like, you know, mid-range pile decks where it becomes really hard to answer a lot of your stuff with just like 1-for-1 removal. A lot of your cards kind of just naturally 2-for-1, or just naturally are really hard to just completely remove or deal with. You know, kind of as I was talking about, like Adolphi dodges a lot of removal and things like that. And you really force these decks to kind of play to your different like ranges, where you force them to have this like anti-aggro plan early, where otherwise they're going to get beat down. But then then you pivot to the space mid game, or you pivot to this big mid game, where they have to have the right cards to interact at that point. And then you also have a great late game, so they still have to be able to interact there. So it just becomes like a lot like too much often where they're able to often interact with like one part of your game plan, but then you're able to just take over during some other part, is how I found a lot of these matchups playing out. So I think, yeah, being favored in this meta, because I think Kira is probably one of the best decks. Like Kira and Sabine, right, are the top two for sure. Being favored into like the best decks is a really good spot to be in. The other thing is, yeah, I think we're pretty favored into Sabine, mainly the fact that just we have a lot of similar cards, but Han2 Data Vault has 8 more life than Sabine, right? So we're able to just kind of race Sabine a lot of the time. Some games against Sabine, you are going to, do the whole like getting efficient trades into Sabine and everything like that. But there are going to be a lot of times where you're able to just like find a really good race spot and you're just like, hey, I have 8 more life than you. I have a lot of the same cards. I have like multiple Adelphis in hand, and I'm able to just kind of kill you before you kill me. So yeah, being favored in Sabine is also really good. And yeah, this is like a pretty good matchup spread, I think, for at least Minneapolis. I'm sure things will change, but this was definitely felt like it was a good matchup spread for the tournament. All right, decks that were kind of like even or maybe slightly unfavored into, I would say that Han Solo, and I think the most popular version of this right now is like the green list. There are going to be games against Han Solo where we just like can't interact and they kill us with a Falcon with a Chewbacca on it, and there's not much we could do about that. But there's also going to be games against them where we have the confiscate for the Chewbacca and we're able to just kind of race them on the ground. A lot of times, I did beat this deck twice in Minneapolis, and a lot of times, what I realize is you kind of just can ground race them, and you gotta hope that like you have put enough pressure on them by the time they play like their 7, and they're going to play a 7 because it's Han, right? That you just are ahead enough on like the go wide ground race plan, or maybe you started pivoting to space or something like that, that you're able to just kind of cross the finish line there. That's what I found most successful doing in that matchup. And then Quinlan is probably a little bit harder. Again, I was talking about how Tarkin down is kind of a natural counter to Han 2. The thing about Quinlan is, sure, he's going to be able to control your board early, but the thing is, Quinlan often struggles if we're able to get to the point where we're able to really get into the space kind of mid-range pivot plan, because Quinlan has a lot of issues dealing with these bigger chunky units in space. So as long as we're able to kind of stabilize after he pops our first unit, it's not too bad, but definitely a little bit, we're starting off on the back foot in this matchup because Quinlan has the Tarkin Town. And then getting into the matchups that are unfavored, I definitely feel like Cad Bane, Tarkin Town is definitely our worst matchup. He's able to, similarly to Quinlan, he always can deal with like our first unit just with the Tarkin Town or the Ping Tarkin Town. And then the other thing that makes the matchup a lot more favored for Cad is that Cad's interaction just lines up better, really well into us. Remember how I was talking about how we have a really difficult time dealing with these like big units that are hard to kill. So let's say, and because like Cad has cards like Relentless Pursuit that let him, just like capture our important units and then put a shield on a bounty hunter, and we just have no way to deal with that now. So we're just never getting our captured card back, and then Cad is just beating us down and disrupting our hand of Bazine and doing all this kind of stuff. It makes the matchup really hard, and especially if he draws like McClunkies, and he doesn't have to like use the Target Town early maybe or something like that. That also can make it even more difficult. So I think against Cad, the closest that I've gone and the best plan I have into this is you really just need to do that space thing as well and just hope that they don't have like the Relentless Pursuits and things like that to be able to interact, because that's really the only way that you're kind of having a chance in this matchup, because Cad is a lot stronger on the ground, obviously. So just trying to go space and pray that you're able to get there is probably like the best plan there. Vader is another matchup that I think is a little bit rough. I did beat it in the tournament, but the games were really close. I think a lot of what Vader is doing kind of just like is hard to interact with for us, and the Vader's interaction is really good into our deck. Kind of similarly, we have a lot of issues like dealing with like a clone combat squadron that ends up sticking around or something like that, and if they're able to like overwhelming broads in the clone combat squadron, that is huge. I mean, we do have confiscate sometimes, so if they don't know that we're on main deck confiscate and they deploy a Vader as like a pilot, we can kind of maybe get him there sometimes. But I think in this matchup we just gotta go to the ground and try to race them and hope that we can kind of get there. Doesn't always work depending on what their interaction is, but I think that's kind of like the best plan into Vader. And then Palpatine's another really hard matchup where a lot of times like we're not Sabine. We are only really good in Sabine because we just have more life on the base, but we're just not as fast as Sabine, which then gives Palpatine a lot of time to stabilize. And then when Palpatine stabilizes and he gets to a point where he's able to just kind of do his flip turn, that's really bad for us because we've been playing units the whole game that have damage on them, and we don't have a way to really easily play around his flip turn while still putting pressure on him. So this is another matchup that's pretty rough. You kind of just hope that you can kind of kill him before the flip turn, because otherwise he's gonna take your board and it's gonna be bad. All right, so yeah, this is obviously not every matchup in the meta, but this is kind of like the ones that are pretty popular that I wanted to talk about. The other thing I know people are gonna ask is kind of what changes would you kind of make to the deck right now? So if I was playing like a tournament tomorrow, I think this is the list that I would register. It's pretty close to the list that I actually registered for Minneapolis. The main changes is I just ended up taking out the Anakin, and then I put in another guerrilla attack pod. I found that Anakin, the original idea with Anakin was that he was going to be basically like a fourth copy of Poe. Turns out he is not a fourth copy of Poe. Just not having the really strong on attack is just a lot worse and a lot less threatening to your opponent. But Guerrilla Attack Pod definitely overperformed, so I kind of wanted another copy of that card. And then in the sideboard, I ended up cutting the Chewbacca's for another copy of Bombing Run, and then a copy of Radis. Bombing Run, I think we're definitely going to be seeing an uptick of the Vader, TIE Swarm space deck. So just having another Bombing Run helps us postboard in that matchup a lot. And then Radis is a card that I think would be pretty strong. I haven't tested it too much, but being just another like 7 or 6 cost unit that you're able to just have it be a really big threat and be part of like kind of that space mid-game pivot where 8 attack is huge and they have to kill it. But then you'll get the win defeated and you'll still get value off of it, so that's really nice. So that's like another card that I wanted to try here. And I kind of want to just like look at if there's any other cards that I wanted to talk about while we're here that I didn't get a chance to talk about before. I think the last thing I'm looking at is kind of just like this General Riken package with like the Echo Base and the Bright Hopes. General Riken is really nice, and this is probably the card out of everything in the deck. I think General Riken is the card I don't use the Han discount on the most often. Having that 7 HP with the Sentinel is just really strong and often can like block out people trying to use like 6 attack units or something like that. And then also being able to buff like Bright Hopes or Echo-based defenders is pretty strong as well. So this is kind of like a nice little package that's able to kind of like stabilize you in the mid game and give you some time to get to like your bigger ships. Other than that, like we have like the Cham's main deck, which is really strong if we end up queuing into any deck that's trying to ramp or Han 1, but also just like is a really strong unit because sometimes just playing like a 4-mana 5/4 that stats really well into opposing 3/5s is really nice. Or there are some matchups where a 3-mana 5/2 is also going to be a really solid stat line as well. Finally, the Resistance Blue Squadron is kind of just like additional copies of Hammerhead that can come in at different points. You can almost think about that card as like another like P32 type of card where at worst you're just kind of you're playing it for like 3 resources and as a 3/2 in space and getting like a ping. But at best, like I've had it come in and bring it back off of a home 1 and shoot something for 6. So. It's almost it does a similar role often to Hammerhead, just like a different part of the game. So yeah, that's the deck, and this is what I would play now. I think that's like the main things I wanted to cover with this deck tech. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. I'm gonna be definitely doing a lot more content as we get into Legends of the Forest and we get a lot closer to Galactics. So be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.